Okay, so just before we began today, Izette very graciously and kindly agreed to offer her Sun Sabian symbol expression for us to look at least to begin with. So, and I understand it's Taurus 26 to 30. What's the actual degree of your sun?
Taurus 30.
Taurus 30. Okay, lovely. Thank you. James, do you want to begin?
Okay, so this is the sixth expression of Taurus, and it's called depth. The previous two were called awakening, which we studied recently. That was my sun sign. And after awakening, we have authority, and this the sixth expression of Taurus is depth. So we're beginning the group of 5 with Taurus 26, and the first of any batch of expression of 5 degrees in an expression sets the theme, the fundamental theme of that expression. And so here we have a Spaniard serenading his señorita. And of course, this is the image of romance, and we might be mistaken for thinking that it's about romance, but it's not. This is an appropriate way to conduct romance, and it's more to do with appropriateness than anything to do with the romance. So we're talking about acting appropriately and learning how to do that, and also understanding that the reason behind this is that we train ourselves to be the way we act and the way we speak. So society has set in place this series of behaviors, partly to structure the boundaries of interaction for all people, but partly also to train every one of us to learn to be more willing to be civilized, actually to make a difference to who we are and how we are really, not only behavior, but the inner sense of self. So in this first degree of the expression of depth, we're being trained by common practice to become better people. Does anybody have any planets in this last 5 degrees of Taurus?
Not I, but my mom and my son. So I'll be very interested as I learn about them better.
Which ones are they, Linda?
I was just looking at that. So my son is actually the 29, Taurus 29, well, 2958. So that would be 30. He's also, that's his sun. His moon is, well, that's a little earlier in Taurus. He's all over Taurus. My mom is MC 26.8 and Uranus 26.8.
So your mum's midheaven and Uranus are exactly conjunct at the 27th degree.
Oh, and her Jupiter is 2737. So she's got so many points in Taurus, her Sun, her Jupiter, her Saturn, her Uranus, her MC.
Okay, I think, we can bring in a few bits of information about our family, but it would be going too far to include.
That's okay. I'm just
your son has the same sun sign as Izette at the 30th degree of Taurus. That's something that we can perhaps embrace in our understanding. Does anybody have any reason to have studied a Spaniard serenading his señorita before? No? Yeah? What have you got any comments, Heather?
It's funny you talk about appropriateness. So it was just yesterday, I got very upset at my son and I lost my temper on him. And I felt really bad. And this came up. And to me, when I read it, what it said was, to me, was to woo him back after kind of, creating a trauma in our relationship. And the idea of appropriateness is really interesting if I think about it that way, because it's not just wooing him back after me really losing my temper. It's me wooing him, behaving appropriately, I guess, in that it's inappropriate to lose my temper. It was inappropriate for me to get so angry.
I like the way you've woven together the two kind of senses within the degree there, to woo somebody back after having lost their trust, faith, empathy, whatever. But we do need to sort of court favor sometimes because there's tension to overcome. And if we behave inappropriately, then to use a bit of charm to undo the damage is in keeping. So I hadn't seen that connection in the degree before. Thank you for that. So this is the fundamental theme. This is the thrust of this expression. Idea.
Since music is so much a part of my spiritual practice, I see this also as a way to court the beloved, the higher planes. That's very much a part of the way I see it.
Yes, yeah, there is something about music that enables us to act appropriately, isn't there?
Yeah, that was the way that I had read, because my first encounter, reading it first, my reaction was, how sentimental. I didn't feel that sort of immediate connection to it. But when I thought about, singing to spirit or courting the beloved, like paying honor to the beloved, because I was sort of, struck by in the very, like the template, I think, of the man serenading the senorita. There's that hierarchical, in my mind at least, the image of the man on the ground with the guitar and the woman up in the balcony. And so I really felt it was,
exalting,
sort of raising the voice up to reach
it's raising the voice up. It's also making sure that the man can behave in an attitude of humility. And more than that, opening up a vulnerable side to his nature, because to sing is to disclose your full emotional range. And I think, singing by way of courtship enables the courtee, that's probably the wrong word, but the woman to read the emotional nature of the man, and that's present within singing. And I think that's what courtship is for, isn't it? So that you both get a chance to kind of check each other out before crossing the Rubicon. So in contrast to that, the second degree, any batch of 5, represents that sense of, yeah, that's all very well and good, but in contrast to the first. So here we have an old native woman selling beads. The original text uses a non-PC word for native woman, which I've changed in today's text. I was told off by a Native American woman for using the word. Here we go. So this old native woman is sitting by the roadside with some beads that are for sale, but she doesn't really give a damn who buys them or whether she sells them. She's just absolutely indifferent to everything. And she's not got any worries, not got any ambitions. She's completely into this realm of detachment, a very peaceful, calm way of being. This is how I read this particular symbol. And I'm very intimately connected with this symbol, for it's my moon. And I love it. When I first came across the symbol, I didn't really understand it until I realized it's about somebody who's just okay with everything. Whatever happens, it's just like, fine, so what, And there is that about me, so what, so if somebody wants me to court her in a particular way, I just won't work for me. This is how I am, like it or not, I'm not a very courtly gentleman, not very romantic. So I'm the contrast to the first principle. It's like there might be a correct way of doing things, but I don't care. I do things this way. Discuss. Any commentary about that?
The connection that I made to the symbol was a couple years ago. I felt like the presence of the crone with me for a while, and after several days, I finally asked her, I was like, what do you want? And she said, plant me a garden. And I saw flowers sort of at shoulder height, and her rationale was like, I don't want to bend over to smell the flowers. And I knew that she meant turn the front lawn into a wildflower garden. And I mean, it was a lot of work, first of all, but the connection I was making to this degree symbol was, I had wanted to keep the front yard kind of tidy for the neighbors, while you know, all the action in my gardening used to happen in the back. I have just a very idiosyncratic garden, and the front yard, I kind of wanted to keep up appearances of being kind of like a normal person. And so the message of the crone was like, who cares what other people think of you? And what's funny is that even though I still tend to like apologize for the wildness of the garden, I find that, you know, some people get it, like see the beauty of it past like the untidiness of it. And so that, I think that's what I'm learning is not caring so much what other people think, and the connection I was making from the degree prior, you know, like following the rules, and then getting to this degree is knowing the rules well enough to break them, and sort of honoring spirit in that way, in like the, you know, outside of the template of what had been deemed sort of conventional or acceptable. That was my reading of the second degree.
You have the ecologists on your side nowadays as well. They're telling people to let their gardens go wild, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay, so can we see the contrast between the second and the first, 27th and 26th? Is it obvious?
Yes, I think because in the first one, you're learning to behave appropriately, but in the second one, you're not caring so much about anything external. You're more detached from the external and more inwardly focused.
Yeah, indeed.
I think that the fact that she's selling beads is sort of important.
It is.
Sort of something that somebody would wear, you know, sort of that would be sort of something that is personal. But the process of, I don't know whether you've ever sort of strung beads, it's sort of almost like a meditative process. I mean, you could sort of draw an analogy to get towards with what you said, Yvette, about your garden, you know, sort of, because like each of the beads will be different, you know, like we're sort of for an indigenous person, they're not talking about necessarily store-bought beads. They might be nowadays, but it's sort of, it's a very laborious process to make a string of beads that she's selling, you know, like she might be sitting there looking like, I don't know, to sit beside the roadside selling stuff. I've done that before. And you have to have a very meditative sort of attitude, because you can't sort of, you know, not every car is going to stop, not every person is going to value what you've got. You've got to be sort of fairly content with yourself. You're there doing it, a bit like what you said about sort of like saying, you know, so what, I'm here. But the fact that she's selling something that has a value, that has been invested in the production of the beads, I think is important, because she could be just sort of selling bananas, or she could be, you know, sort of doing anything.
And that's underlined in the description, that these beads represent 1,000 years of cultural development.
Yeah.
They're absolutely precious, but valueless. I mean, you know, you sell them for a few cents, and yet, you know, 1,000 years of cultures within them. And the strapline here is, the soul is indifferent to circumstances and scenarios. That's
Right.
the kind of higher wisdom on it.
So when you bring the fruits of your practice, your meditation, or whatever that spiritual connection is, and of course with Native Americans, we know all this is an ancient ceremonial intent. And then you're by the roadside, you know, you know, who's the taker? You know, you're just, you have to be somewhat indifferent to who the audience is going to be, I think, to accept those fruits of your labor.
Yeah.
As a crone, What's the name for an older man, James? A man with breasts. What? Our elders are, yeah.
Well, the strapline is also refers to the wisdom of an elder. So I don't think that's a gender-defined term, is it? An elder can be a woman or a man. Old geezer, some
Geezer.
All right.
I really like, I just wanted to say that I really liked like the quiet, meditative, rather indifferent vision of like a image of a cellar that Adya and Peter were talking about. It's like capital, like the marketplace is so noisy, you know, right now. And I really like that image of somebody who knows his or her, like the value of the wares or whatever, just sort of quietly being in their space and not trying to get the attention of every car and come at you aggressively. I really like that. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Woman pursued by mature romance, Taurus 28. Perpetual new beginnings. We do not avoid disappointment by denying life, but by trusting in faith. The limits of the physical body need not stop us from new opportunities. The sense of a time-based linear degrading of capacity is refuted. We do not need to grow old and die off, but instead always have the capacity to find a new beginning. For example, we can fall in love even when this is driven mostly by the heart's joy in sharing rather than sexuality and procreation. So we're looking for a way that this somehow reconciles the first 2 degrees within the expression.
I'm looking at the wording on your side, and there's one thing that says we can come to understand that external events are simply expressions of conscious and unconscious personal choices rather than enforced limitations. So it's like, Beck, you know, the second one was, the first one was about the outside world and fitting in. The second one was about not caring so much about the outside world, going within. And then this one seems to be saying, you know, whatever is happening outside of us, it's just an expression of what we're choosing, whether it's conscious or unconscious. So it seems to me like it's a combining those two concepts. I don't know if I'm expressing that well, though.
Yeah, that gets a little bit, Linda, to what I was trying to scribble when I was considering this degree. I was feeling it as sort of like the 0 point neutral ground, open to possibilities, and especially open to the surprise. I think the surprises of life, and not judging them immediately as good or bad or right for me, not right for me, you know, like a knee-jerk reaction.
I'm getting, excuse me, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So a while back, I read a book by, excuse me, I don't speak French, but Jacques Lucerne, who read an arm of the French resistance during Nazi occupation. And he was blind, and he went into the concentration camp. And at the end of his book, he had all these elevated states while he was actually in this horrible physical condition. So at the end of the book, he says the whole reason that he wrote the book was to explain that joy arises from no external condition. Mm-hmm. And I feel that this statement really resonates with this Sabian symbol.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
See, oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, I see some links too with the idea of pursuing, but pursuing at a higher level. Like in the first one, the woman is being pursued, but only through music in a respectful way. In the second one, when you sell, you can sell really aggressively, but she's selling beads quietly. You know what I mean? In this one, love can be aggressive, it can be intense, but this isn't aggressive, intense love. This is mature, this is quiet, this is, you know, for me, that's the thread, I guess, for through all three symbols.
There is a commonality of maturing, isn't there? A maturity in the three of them. There's a very definite commentary on how women can be more mature and how they express that.
And kind of rising above the animal, I guess, rising above the lower instincts to the higher instincts.
Hmm.
I also, oh no.
I just noted that I'm a big fan of the works of Ruby Fumitsky in your page. They are absolutely wonderful. And in this case, you'd see that the first degree is this flamenco. The second degree, the 26, the 27 is not the Indian woman, is the other part of they are the three connected. If you see the 1, 2, and 3, they are all the same picture. It's something to note in this, because it's not very usual. I mean, I've seen that there are many different pictures that Ruby uses for different degrees, but in this case, she kind of used the same image in 3 different ways. That's
good.
Somebody else wanted to speak, didn't they?
Oh, I was also thinking about the first degree in this batch of being like the lover addressing himself to the beloved. And then the second is this, you know, woman who seems so autonomous. And then the third is this woman that is not, you know, desperately seeking love, but open to love. And so I felt like kind of like a shift in, you know, like an opening, I guess, in the development of the 3 degrees.
Yeah, if you want to take it at that level, I think you can. The spiritual commitment is really clear. I think the second image, the old woman, is investing in the spirituality of the past, that the beads represent her ancestral spiritual culture. And as you pointed out, the musicality, the sacredness of the act of courtship, and that was celebrated in the Middle Ages in England, wasn't it? The courtly love principle, knightly love, you know, the behavior of the perfect knight. That was a spiritual experience, you know. So we're talking about that kind of thing. And here we have perhaps an even deeper symbol where the real issue here is that even though you don't expect to have something as delicious as new love, it can come along in a moment. The whole idea that life is like that, perpetual new beginnings. And I would say the essence teaching in Sufism is exactly that. The most frequently spoken word in the world, I would say, of any consequence, would be Bismillah. And that means new beginnings, sacred new beginnings. You know, there's 1 billion people in the world use that word every day, you know, more, yeah, give or take, bit of an exaggeration there. Bismillah, a new beginning. So that if you hold your mind like that, you just acknowledge that this is a new day and this is a new reality for me, then whatever comes to you is likely to represent that sense of expecting newness, freshness. And on one level that could be romance, another level it could be whatever you desire. All right, so in 29 we're often given an explanation in how. How does this mystery become applied? What do we need to learn? Our methodology, our technology. And here we have two cobblers working at a table. Understanding someone else's way requires objectivity about our own opinions, respecting other ways of being and doing. To optimize our own achievements and joy, we need the wisdom of others. Mature understanding, here's the word maturity again, arises out of seeing the other point of view, and the deepening of wisdom moves towards having less staunch opinions on matters. New experiences test our maturity of wisdom. Do we react in a knee-jerk manner and take up a posture, or can we work collaboratively with another to deepen our knowledge? So we have yet another relationship between two people. You know, that's a real theme of what's going on in this batch, isn't it? And in this case, we have a different quality of love. These two cobblers, I imagine that they've been working together for decades. They know each other better than they know themselves in some ways, and they're symbiotic. They can't actually survive alone. They've got different skills that they've developed, and they just work as a unit. And there's a painting of two cobblers that's quite famous, and quite often stories are written about two cobblers. It's a very definite archetype, isn't it? Two old guys working together with this skill, and it's always cobblers, isn't it? You know, but in my history, I've kind of noticed this theme again and again. So it's that sense that we have of being so willing to surrender the inappropriate aspects of ourselves in order to form relationship. And if two people do that, then some synergy develops, which is unrivaled. And this is suggested as the method how we achieve the theme of the expression, which we recall is depth. And it's not what you think of when you have a guy serenading a senorita. You don't think, oh, he really wants to get deeply involved. You think that what he wants is romance, principally. That's the image that I've got. And yet you come to the old woman, and it's unquestionable that she has a depth of knowledge, a depth of experience. You know, there's the principle of depth is given there, and this idea of the perpetual new beginnings represents a real depth of wisdom, that actually most people are invested in what has gone before. Very few people greet the day as though it was a new life. Almost nobody, you know. So we're all kind of invested in the past, and to some extent in the plans we have for the future, which the only one thing we know about our plans is that they won't come to pass. So we're invested in two aspects of falseness. So somebody who is actually in the moment, into the moment of new beginning, is experiencing the depth of life. And here we have again the cobblers. How can we doubt that their relationship is profoundly an expression of depth?
I really like I get a lot of silence from this degree, and because it doesn't seem like they're, you know, talking to each other as they're working. It really feels like they're working in silence. And it brought me to a couple things. One is an experience I had with a friend, and we'd see each other intermittently. And I remember one time we got together for dinner after not having seen each other for months, and we spent, you know, the first hour sort of just catching up. And then we got the sense that like the table, you know, was kind of this physical barrier between us. And so he came and sat beside me, and we just sat in silence for a few moments, and I feel like in that silence, that was when the real catching up, the real depth of the relationship could be felt. Like you could just, or I could just, we could just feel the kind of like transmission of unspoken things between us. And I think it was one of the things that brought me to a deeper level in my work with others. And sometimes I feel like the best work I do is in complete silence with somebody else. And actually part of the blessing that I say in the beginning seems to speak to these two cobblers, because the literal words I say is, I am you and you are me, one with all and all in one, as a way of acknowledging sort of like, linking fields of consciousness and perspectives. And I don't know, I loved this degree. There's this degree I love. Yeah.
I think it's really important to think about shoes. Shoes are always really important in fairy tales. That idea of being the way you walk in the world, and the foundation. And these cobblers, while we're focusing on their relationship with one another, are also servicing their unseen patrons. They're making or repairing shoes. So what happens between the two of them also benefits the whole community, their concentration and craft. So to me, that's, we've had all these kind of to look at the relationship, the romantic level, and now we're seeing this, the practice is actually, they have customers, they're making or helping other people walk in the world in some way. That's what I get.
When you say that, it makes me remember, I've got this symbol before when asking questions about politics. And to me, there's an element of strategizing and planning between these two cobblers. It's like, I don't know if I'm saying it right either, but something working together to make a plan. To me, again, it's like higher mind function, where we, people are making plans. People are creating something that they'll send forth, like in the shoes. When you said that, it really sparked it back to my mind.
Yeah, well, to be creative together, then each has to maintain maintain their own space. And the concentration of being creative doesn't need words. It just is action. So it's sort of, you could say, as heart in action as well. Also, the other interesting thing is about being cobblers, like you always have two shoes. So they have to work together. But, I don't know whether you've ever bought factory-made shoes, but they're not necessarily made by the same person or on the same day of the week. And so it's always important to experiment two shoes together, because they might have been made by different people.
I had a breakthrough in consciousness. I used to work in the industry, the footwear industry. And I was staggered when I was discussing one shoe. And they didn't call it one shoe, they called it a half pair. It's great, isn't it? So their whole unit of thinking is two. And it's absolutely the mood that is created by the cobblers is pretty much exactly what people say they hope they get to in their relationship, where they want to be old with their partner and sitting, in armchairs by a fire in silence, just knowing that silence is golden. That's what people describe as the epitome of a successful relationship so very often. That's what happily ever after means, isn't it? Yeah, in a way. Okay, so the fifth degree in any expression is the stepping stone, the progression towards the next wisdom, and therefore the bringing it all togetherness, the whole five. And here we have the peacock parading on an ancient lawn, which is the sun sign of Link's sun and also of Izet. Our personal displays of excellence bears testimony to all that went before us. Embellishment. Individuality seeks both maturity of understanding and full substantiation of worth, wisdom, and wealth. Gifts inherited and improved upon are shown to be, in part, the flowering of cultural aspirations and its pride and joy. Embellishing our life expression. Seek answers from within against popular opinion if necessary.
It's interesting to me how this idea of these feathers, which are actually an element of avian courtship, kind of reflect all the way back through all the other Sabians. I never had seen that before.
Say more.
You know, that the male bird in its isolation, you know, in this environment, manifested this highly decorative ability to attract a mate. This peacock on the lawn actually sort of reflects back through these ideas of quiet manifestation of something others don't see, and then this sort of courtship element of huge display, which kind of, both of those are kind of running through these symbols. And for me, that all that is very Venus-like. The idea of adornment, of courtship, of relationship, and of this also sometimes an isolation in order to develop one's sensitivities to your own aesthetics and your own craft of bringing that into the world.
Yeah, very good.
Right.
It is Venus-like. I mean, we're talking Venus. We're talking Taurus's ruling planet, Venus. That needs to be mentioned. Thank you for doing that. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was also speaking of Venus and looking at the evolution from the first degree in this series to this last degree. I was thinking of, the position of humility of the man serenading senorita, and then the peacock knowing its value, knowing its worth, and so it's out there courting, but it's also doing it from this position of not so much arrogance, but kind of like, I know I'm this beautiful creature. And there was something about sort of the fan of the feathers that really, because I've been kind of grappling with this degree symbol. I was really struck in our Tuesday call how much love for their degrees that Richard and Peter, and I'm sure there were other people that, seem to have like this sort of like natural affinity. And I'm not there yet with my degree. But one thing I was thinking about this morning was the fan of the feathers and how each feather could be sort of an aspect of being, and opening up kind of the unfolding of the self. So you can really see kind of like your splendor. That was the word that came, was the splendor of being.
Absolutely, yeah. So what would you say was the most peacock-like you are, or you have been?
There was a period of my life when I got into the aerial arts, and it came kind of from nowhere. I mean, I grew up really uncoordinated, unathletic, not very strong. And during a period of burnout, I got into flying trapeze, just kind of recreationally at first. And then I was like studying at 3 schools. And I almost, if I hadn't moved from the city to the country up here and become a gardener, I would have run away to the circus. And there was, there's a performative aspect to that that I think had never come naturally to me. And now that I don't fly anymore, I find myself much more, I'm not out there on the stage doing anything.
Peacocks don't fly very well either.
I know. I know.
Not for long. Not for long. They can, but not for long.
But also the trapeze artist, even though is on display and performance, is very centered internally.
Yeah.
I mean, your experience in that moment is very internal and focused. And other people are witnessing that splendor and that performance, but you're not performing to the crowd. You're performing in your own self.
Yeah, and actually, so the director of the circus school that I was in, she was saying you could sort of tell the difference between somebody who's doing it for the audience and somebody who's doing it for themselves. Mm-hmm. And that seemed to separate out, I mean, apart from, like sheer strength and ability, there was like a generosity, and I think of it as very Leo, like sort of that generosity of spirit for the ones who were doing it to perform, not in a grabby attention kind of way, but really to share the experience with the audience. But it was much more internal for me.
One thing that I'm seeing as we're going through the 5 different degrees is the theme of courtship, and the theme of internal versus external, and kind of maturing, developing your sense of self through partly learning how to accept other people's opinions or behave appropriately with other people, and at the same time detaching from other people's opinions and going within to develop your own internal sense of self. That's what I'm seeing with the 5 different, it's and the closer we get to the later degrees, which is my son, I'm seeing him more and more. He's a philosophy major, very very unique in our circle as far as being able to handle political conversations that are very polarized, and he stays very centered and calm, and he's able to hear other people's opinions without getting reactive, but he's also very strong in his opinions. So that kind of detachment and aloofness and calm and centeredness, and but developing and deepening his sense of self through understanding other people's opinions at the same time. So there's like a synergy between, self and other, that relationship.
Indeed. I mean, much is made of the location of the peacock. It's on an ancient lawn, and we haven't really brought that in, but that relationship is the wisdom of this degree. The peacock wouldn't be quite so peacock-like were it not for the lawn. You just can't enjoy a peacock so much in the shopping mall. It just wouldn't be right. It needs to be on the ancient lawn, and an ancient lawn. What an interesting idea, an ancient lawn, as though a lawn improves or changes over time. A 100-year-old lawn is not quite as good as a 500-year-old one. That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, well, that's what's implied here, isn't it? It's like somebody's been improving this lawn for a very long time, and you couldn't do that without the cherry on the cake, which is the peacock. The peacock is simply the lawn made into a bird. That's the whole thing, and the bird is the peacock. No other bird compares in beauty, or in glory, or whatever that kind of beauty is called. It's the bee's knees, isn't it? The peacock. And we have to remember that the investment in that spread of color is quite significant in terms of the body's efficiency. You've got to eat food in order to do something which is pretty much a waste of time. That huge wingspan for a bird that can't actually fly very well, it's just to show off, and that's just to get a mate. And the whole species didn't really work that out very efficiently at all, did they? The men have to eat more food in order to attract the women. And what kind of nonsense is that? Well, it's exactly the kind of nonsense that aristocrats display who have ancient lawns, isn't it? That's what they do. They spend a fortune on trimmings, embellishing life, basically just to show that they're able to do that they've got spare energy. And like a young man with a BMW is doing the same thing. I can afford a BMW, therefore I would make a good mate. That's our modern day equivalent.
But James, if we look at the peacock as the sacred manuscript of nature, you have this infinite bestowing ability. It's not like a thing you judge. You just appreciate the splendor.
Yeah, I think that's the point I'm making, is just that it makes no sense to do this. And like the Sufis approach aristocracy quite controversially. They speak well of it, whereas it's commonplace now to diss the rich. It is understood to be the spiritual height of our experience.
But I love this story of the really poor dervishes who were all, putting crowns on one another, in their movements. We have one of those dances where no matter your station in the caste system, you see the majesty of each individual. So.
There's one other thing. I remember this. The peacock is the symbol of Shiva in the in Hinduism, and maybe there's something there, one element, and the other, the idea that this is at the end of Taurus, and Taurus has to do with the mystery of Maya and the idea of that even this chair might be some sort of an illusion. So this point at the end with this multiple eyes, because the peacock is not also the feathers. The feathers has little eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the idea of the multiple view that at some points Linda talked about it when she talked about her son with this kind of a laid back and understanding different perspectives. This has to do with the mystery of the peacock. We are all watching you somehow. And I play with that, and I'm going to I don't know the word in English, like sort of hypnotize you also. This peacock has a lot to do. It's a mixture between a bird and a snake. Has this strange balance. That's what I wanted to point out.
Your peacocks will hunt snakes. They'll keep snakes away. That's one of the reasons why they were always kept like in Asia, because peacocks will keep the snakes away. They're not afraid of snakes. So
I think there's something too with Taurus and pleasure and ornament, and in the place that pleasure and ornament hold in the world. And to me, the peacock is not displaying. I'm looking at the word embellishment, on your site, James. And when I think about what does the peacock embellish, he doesn't embellish for himself. He embellishes for other people.
Mm-hmm.
he is bringing pleasure to, I mean, he can't see himself. You know, this big display is not, I mean, he may attract a mate through it, evolutionarily speaking, but he's actually, there's an element of selflessness in it, pleasure for others and
I agree,
embellishment
yeah.
for others.
Yeah, I agree with that. Can we see depth in all of this? Speak to that point. Why is this expression the unfolding of depth?
It's
I was thinking of the unfolding of depth as the unfolding in some respects of time. So we start at the beginning with the young man. We move then to the lady who's drawing on ancient wisdoms. And then, so she is, I mean, her lineage has such depth. But then we bring it back to an older lady who is finding that romantic relationship like the young couple, so that experiences don't end with age, they are still happening. And then we bring, when I saw the cobbler, it was an older cobbler and a younger cobbler, as if there was an apprentice relationship there. And there was the learning both of the older man from the younger. They were both men in my head, so forgive me for the gender, but the older man and the younger man, the older man learning from the new ideas of the young man, and the younger man bringing that lineage of cobbling from the older man. And then we bring it all together in this display of beauty, but on an ancient lawn. And I think the depth is coming from the relationship between the old and the new, and the lineage that comes and passes through time, and well, as it says in this, the excellence that bears testimony to everything that went before us. I don't know the kind of lineage of a peacock, but they appear to me to be royal and grand and to have longevity. So that's kind of what's been speaking to me as everybody has been sharing their views.
brilliant.
And that
Absolutely.
in that comes depth.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, the aristocrats that the peacocks hint at, the ancient lawn is aristocratic. The aristocrats didn't get their money during one generation. They have ancestry as much as the old woman and her beads and the traditions associated with the cobblers, that they go back hundreds of years, as much as the Spanish courtship principles. So yeah, this whole idea of time bringing maturity and maturity bringing depth is the essence message here, perhaps.
And I also think some things that last, that like so many things are impermanent, but then what lasts over time, the wisdom that continues to flow throughout from the ancestors to the current, it takes deep wisdom to be sustained, throughout the generations. And there was a lot of speaking about that, like in 27, it says nothing is permanent, nothing external has importance to the soul. It's all about going within and going deep within and detaching from the external. There's a lot of theme of that kind of going within and going deep. And then that having lasting significance.
Even when we go within and go deep, we also express it as in our impetuousness of youth and in our wisdom of age. So you've got kind of like the big display of the peacock, but then you've got that kind of ancient lawn and the centeredness. So, I think the depth comes from having depth within, and yet, still being interested in whether, still being interested in life.
Right. Yeah, because the number 28 was the perpetual new beginnings.
So I'm interested, can you see the peacock or the symbolism of that degree in Izette? Can we recognize it in her?
Well, definitely. I think Izette has said that she is more internal and detached. Didn't you say something to that effect, Izette? Like you were uncomfortable with the showiness of the peacock because you tended to be more introverted, I think. So there is, words like detachment and aloofness are in a lot of these. So that for sure. What about Izette? What do you see?
I would like to know something about how you keep your garden.
Aha.
I would
What do
think
you
that
mean, how do I keep my garden?
well, your relationship with your garden is possibly something that would express this mystery. A gardener is by nature an embellisher.
Oh, yeah.
Embellishing nature, so you do it in a certain way. So how do you embellish nature in your garden was my question.
Oh, okay. So I have like a labyrinth in the back created from like a series of hugelkulturs, and at the center of it is my herb circle, and I feel like that's sort of the center of my sacred space. And the herbs are planted with respect to the 4 directions and the 4 elements, and then I have like a bed to honor the sun, a bed to honor the moon, a bed to honor my ancestors in the Philippines, where I try to grow tropical vegetables in New York with moderate success. And I'm always interested in how people respond to the garden, because right now I was telling Richard I'm in the middle of I actually don't live in my house right now, and my garden is I live a 5-minute drive away from my house because my house was destroyed by a storm this summer, and so my garden also got sort of out of hand. I lost about 90% of my trees. At that time, it was like a 10-minute storm that just wiped the roof off of my house and all these trees. And so the garden is under this deep transformation as well. But one of the workers who came by the house mentioned to my husband that he likes he said, your garden is so zen. And I thought that was kind of funny because it had been untended. I mean, I can't go there as often as I would like. And so I let everything kind of grow wild. And one of my neighbors was like, aren't you worried about ticks? And because I hadn't been mowing the paths. And but there's something, I think some people sense that there's something there that it's not just garden. It's not just plants sort of arranged in a pleasing manner, that there's something there.
It really does sound like embellishment to me.
Yeah.
Well, and also it has the ancient wisdom. She's yeah.
It's like a temple, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also, I'm not sure, I maybe have met you once before, but certainly not more than once. And already, I know quite a few things about you because of what you've been happy to share in here. So whilst you didn't maybe resonate strongly with with the showiness of the peacock, you are prepared to show yourself.
Yeah.
I know that you're a gardener. I know that you are a trapeze artist, or were. I know that you've moved from the city to the country. I know that you've had some kind of distressing thing happening with your house. And I kind of met you an hour ago.
Yeah, good.
And your tradition, your Philippine ancestry.
Yeah. Well done. Yeah, your ancestry as well. So it's very gentle, and it's very gentle, and it's not it's not brashy. but you are willing to share yourself, and that's like a peacock.
And we focused on your Sabians twice. So you've asked for that attention, which is, you're very, very right.
Observations. Yeah.
James, I'm just wondering, at the beginning, you talked about this being the last expression in Taurus, and the fifth and last degree of this expression is a step towards the next. So the relationship between depth and freshness, which is the next expression, might be interesting to look at in the time we have left. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's good. I would also precede that by just drawing attention to the previous two expressions of Taurus. So can we see that, that there is something here where awakening, authority, and depth are Taurus qualities?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
are they
Becoming
related?
more authentically who you are.
Do you associate Taurus with authority?
Well, my mom's Taurus, and she was definitely the authority in our family.
Yeah, I think it's not generally spoken of, but I went through all of the Tauruses I met, and I thought, yep, and all of them were in a position of authority. And it's not discussed. I mean, Leo are the leaders and Capricorn are the go-getters and everything, but actually Taurus usually ends up on top of the pack, on top of the pile, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's an authority about them, us.
Yeah, but it's a different style. It's that kind of more, you know, if I think about that, it's that quiet, assured, you know, that like that bull that's standing there with all that power available, but doesn't have to use it showingly, right? I mean, just
They've had fights.
Embodied.
They've structured fights between lions and bulls, you know, for entertainment purposes in the Middle Ages and stuff. Can you imagine who the winner would be?
yeah, I mean,
is it obvious or not? It surprised people that the bull always wins, you know, there's no question. The lion is just nothing because he's got a weakness on his head, you know.
well, I think the bull has like an intense reserve of energy. It's kind of like a contained energy.
Yeah, that's right. There's this potential for a force that's never released more than once. I mean, once you've seen it once, you wouldn't want to risk it a second time.
It's not wasted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're so Tauruses, they're embodied, right? They, you know, they don't need to prove so much, but there's a lot embodied in Taurus.
Yeah, I loved your description a few weeks ago, Peter. If they just raise up their heads and they look around, they don't have to stand up. You know, standing up would cost them energy, and they've got the ability to see without standing up. Yeah, that's exactly right. You know. One last question before we move on to the stepping stone to Gemini. Like I've asked whether you saw in Izette Taurus 30, do you see Taurus 27 in myself? Do you see me as a little old woman?
Elder, yes.
You can see me as a little old woman, can you?
Well, the elder wisdom, and kind of the detached, dignified, calm. Yeah. Yep.
So do we believe that the depth of Taurus is a springboard towards the freshness of Gemini? Can we get that connection?
Well, there was a lot of that back and forth in Taurus, the old and the new, learning from the old and then also experiencing the new.
The new beginnings, yeah. Have you ever seen a Taurus and a Gemini friendship? I mean, you might not have noticed it. Yes, I do. You have a Gemini friend. You're a Taurus. Richard and my relationship is somewhat airy and earthy in the same way. Who are you thinking of, Richard?
You and my wife.
Me and Julie. Okay. I mean, what were you going to say, Adja?
Oh, my drag sister is a Gemini.
What's a drag sister?
Oh, I do a lot of, well, not a lot. I do some kind of burlesque performance, and I have a friend who dresses female, who's actually male, and so we do a lot of kind of celebratory activity with parades and charity fundraisers, and we have a very deep friendship.
Yeah, that's a good example where you've got this almost silliness of Gemini. They don't find it silly. This is just normal to them, but they can actually pull a Taurus into that realm of doing silly things, which a Taurus would never even dream of, but wouldn't resist.
I beg to differ.
Oh, you do dream of it. Okay. But I think the most important point is that they wouldn't resist. Peter.
Well, they're both highly perceptive. I mean, Taurus tends to perceive sort of like from the ground up, and Gemini tends to perceive from the air down. So they have a meeting point, a very interesting meeting point. That their perception, their intuitive capacity will bring them to the same ground.
It's surprising how much Gemini understands, really. They don't seem to be very sort of deep. They seem shallow, but actually they're getting it all. It's just they get it so quickly. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. They have to be able to pass it on, like the thing is, if you have, like Taurus has got 2 horns, right? So it has a certain relationship to Gemini in its 2ness, up here, it sort of has 5 stomachs, but it's got 2 horns, right? So there's this type of relationship thing that's going on with Taurians that Geminis can associate to, only Geminis have got to be free, whereas Taurus is totally embodied and grounded,
I was actually really thinking about this last week, what it means to be in the last degree of Taurus. And the funny thing is that growing up, because I was born on the 21st, and so I think a lot of people told me I was a Gemini. So I grew up, I don't know, spending like 3 decades of my life thinking I was a Gemini. Mm-hmm. But just this last week, I was thinking about Taurus sort of filling itself up over its 30 degrees and then getting to the last degree. And then there's that emptying out and getting ready to share it with the world. And I was thinking of a time in my life when I was pursuing a career in academia, and then when I got toward the end of it, and I realized it wasn't for me, and so I finished up my degree, and I went through a period of just seeking, reassessing, trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I came upon the work, and I don't even remember the name of the author anymore, but he writes a lot about transitions. From an individual perspective, and also he works with institutions. So he asks individuals and institutions questions about themselves so that they can get to know themselves more and manage transitions with grace. And I remember finding these books so valuable at the time, and I literally would walk around with them and sort of pull them out of my bag whenever I was talking to someone who I sensed would benefit from this, was also going through a transition. And I feel like that's that's a really central part of who I am, is sort of trying to learn a lot and integrate it and then share it. And I think that has something to do with that transition between Taurus and Gemini.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I think the whole the last 3 expressions, awakening kind of suggests knowledge. Authority demands knowledge. Depth, also pointing to knowledge. Well, you get knowledge by learning stuff. And I certainly regard myself as somebody who always expects to be learning, and I don't think that'll end. I've got the appetite for more and more information. And so Geminis are quite, they're usually interesting people to learn from, aren't they? They've got information at their fingertips on everything under the sun, typically. And it's fresh, I do get the freshness of Gemini follows nicely from Taurus, especially when we're doing this contrast, like masculine, feminine, Aries, masculine, Taurus, feminine, Gemini, masculine. So that flip-flopping is taking place. And Gemini does that really well.
And then if you have a depth of knowledge that's from the wisdom of the ages, but then you want to put a fresh spin on it, right? So that's where the Gemini comes in to take the established and turn it into a new version or interpretation or.
Indeed. That's good. We're all done. Any other points, questions? You sure you were going to speak?
I was going to say we have just under 10 minutes left, and are there any final points anyone would like to make? If not, I have something else, another question I'd like to ask. Yes, Loic.
From my learning of the peacock, I have learned that it is protective and powerful bird, or lack thereof, but it's very powerful and protective at the same time. And that the feathers have been used for rituals and decorative purposes. And we showed in the symbols of the selling of the bees, it is represented there. And I feel like there is a lot of symbolism of the peacock surrounding each degrees. It's almost like there is a small piece of the peacock in each. The bluish and green tint of has always been associated, or of my knowledge, associated with royalty. So the aloofness aspects, and the eyes within the feathering have often been associated with greater vision and wisdom. And so Izet, she's part of this group, and I think that it requires that greater wisdom or vision to be able to speak of those symbols. And this aspect of watchfulness aspect is also part of the peacock. And I also learned from the Chinese mythology that the plumage is a blending of 5 colors that have a sweet harmony of sound. And the first one was about a serenade, and about the music aspect is there too. So yeah.
Beautiful.
That's great. Thank you. Was that your police car?
That was outside. Yeah, that was not mine.
No, it's just that you were entirely ignoring it as a normal part of your day. And my heart was going, oh my God, they're coming for. I live in such a peaceful place. I haven't heard a sound like that for 10 years.